Welcome again to Educator.com, and it wouldn't be a reading comprehension course if we didn't have a lesson about kill your TV. Once upon a time, in the great era of 1996, there was this movie called The Cable Guy. It had an actor named Jim Carrey in it, and he was a stranger that came to town, and he was the cable guy. He came by and fixed Matthew Broderick's cable and said, "Hey man, let's be friends." No, let's really be friends. Let's just keep being friends and friends. And he was obsessive, he was lonely, and he was a little nuts. He didn't know when to go away. And why was he this way? Why was he so crazy? Because of too much TV. Finally, at the end of the movie, Jim Carrey's character sacrifices himself because someone has to kill the babysitter. Now, this movie, and you can maybe YouTube it or Netflix it or however you want to do to kind of understand what I'm talking about here. If this movie was made today, would we only be talking about TV, making someone a little nuts? Well, wouldn't we also be talking about the internet and stuff like that that's similar to TV? Maybe we'd be talking about video games or social networking. It's just way too accessible now, isn't it? So, in this course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a little bit about the hazards of television. Then I'm going to talk about the good things. And then after that, there's going to be an assignment where you actually track how much time you watch TV and anything like TV, which would be Netflix, YouTube, or stuff on the internet that's similar to TV. First off, it is a hazard to the growth of your brain. When you're actually watching TV, your brain is actually less active than when you are asleep. Now, why is this important? Well, I think it should be obvious. I mean, your brain is kind of like a muscle, especially when you're, a teenager and you're 15, between 18, that it kind of needs food as well as exercise. And TV is kind of like junk food for the brain. Strangely enough, if you watch a lot of TV and then you try to go to sleep, you actually get less restful sleep. This is because we have this thing called the circadian rhythm going on in our minds. We, as human beings, instinctively want to be awake and alert when there's light out, and then we want to go to sleep when it's dark. If you look at a glowy screen that's flashing light at you all the time, you're just going to automatically be more alert and have a lot of energy, and it's going to be harder to get to sleep. Now, there's another problem. TV makes you a sucker for advertisements, and I'd like to share a little story about Ben Franklin, if I could. When Ben Franklin was a little kid, he was running around and he saw another kid with a whistle. And Ben Franklin thought this was an amazing whistle, and he immediately went up to this kid and said, "Hey, I will buy that whistle for all the money in my pocket right now." And the other kid said, "All right." Took the money, gave him the whistle. And then Ben Franklin went home and started whistling on this whistle and was having a lot of fun. And then his older sibling said, "Hey, Ben, you paid 4 times as much as what that whistle was actually worth." And then after that, Ben felt like this. He felt upset and he felt sad. And he said to himself, "I will never pay too much for a whistle again." By that, I mean just paying too much for anything. The entire business of advertising, especially on TV, is to make you pay too much for something. And if your brain is less active than when you're asleep, you're probably going to be a sucker for the advertisements. Also, TV correlates with obesity. Now, when I say correlate, I mean for how much time that someone watches TV, there's generally a higher percentage of someone also being obese. And it doesn't mean causing, but it does mean kind of the same thing. According to the Health of Human Services, it notes that 14% of all teenagers are obese. Now, obese doesn't just mean a little overweight or a little chubby. It means obese, like so big that it's actually unhealthy and you're probably going to have a heart attack when you're 30. 66% of people watch TV while they're eating. Now, this doesn't mean that TV causes obesity, but it certainly isn't helping. Now, are there good things about television? Yes. Turns out, television helped bring down drunk driving. Now, you might think that's a little weird, But it turns out that once upon a time, we didn't have this practice called a designated driver. So people would go out to a restaurant, or they'd go out to celebrate, or they'd go out to a hotel, and everybody would, well, have a little too much to drink, or a little at all. And then that kind of thing would cause drunk driving incidents. Now, people in the government, people in the health and human services, they thought, well, how can we convince thousands of people to accept this simple habit? And this habit is, hey, when you go out with your friends, have one person be the driver, and he doesn't get a drop of any alcohol at all. How do you convince thousands of people to start doing that? Well, what they did is they went to TV writers, and they went to people who run sitcoms, and they said, hey, on television, can you make your characters start doing this? Where they go out to a restaurant or fancy places, that one person chooses to be the designated driver. And then, people in the television industry said, okay, yeah, that'll be good. And I think that'll help bring some positive social change. It turned out this worked. Once people started watching sitcoms and soap operas and movie dramas where people were doing the designated driver thing, everybody started to pick up that habit. It's really kind of crazy, but it worked. More generally, there is one positive thing about television, and I do believe that there's a lot of room for creative and artistic expression. I watch TV, and I think that there's a lot of great shows. Now, I think maybe 90% of it's trash, but those gems out there are really, really worth it. And it takes a lot of talent to write a script. It takes about as much as it does to write a book, or it takes as much talent as it takes to be a pro basketball player or a professional musician or, an engineer. It takes a lot of talent to put a good script together. And actors and actresses, they're also wonderfully talented and creative people. A lot of them, they'll never make a living if the only thing they're ever able to do is nonprofit theater. And so, I am kind of glad that, at least television and movies provide a platform for actors and actresses. Now, let's think carefully about why we all enjoy TV before we do our little exercise. First off, actors and actresses. They're basically living their dream job, and they've worked very, very hard to get there. And as a friend of mine put it, they're living their dream by being on TV. Well, maybe you're watching something like American Idol or America's Got Talent, and you got this music, dance, and you got all these other performers. Same thing with them. Even when they get rejected, they're still living their dream, and they've worked hours to get there. Writers I've already mentioned, and I'm sure that some of you have thought about how cool it would be to write a movie or to write a story. And then finally we got pro athletes. Now, these are all kind of different types of things to be really, really good at. And have you ever wondered how they got as good as they are? A lot of practice and a lot of effort. When I was in undergrad, I knew people who were vocal performance majors. And I knew people who were instrument performance majors. These were the best of the musicians in my college. Their practice regimen was 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, 5 days a week. Multiply that out in your head real quick about how much effort that took. Now, some of you, maybe you're a little bit more involved in sports. Well, I'm sure that you can kind of relate to this. How much effort does it take to be the best soccer player, the best football player, the best gymnast, the best whatever? It takes a lot of time. So, your assignment right now is to actually chart your TV time this week. I'm not telling you to watch less TV, and I'm not telling you to watch more TV. I'm just telling you to keep track of it in that notebook that I know you have. So, for the next week, just clock and record, write down the times that you're watching TV. So if you start watching TV when you get home from school at about 4 o'clock, and then you watch Netflix, just say, oh, it's 4 o'clock now, and then, oh, before you know it, it's, 6:45, and I've spent that entire time watching movies, YouTube videos, a couple of my favorite episodes of TV. Just write that down, and do that every day. And then finally, you're going to measure the hours per day that you watch TV. So don't just record 4 to 6:45. Record, I've watched TV for 3.75 hours today, or 2.5 hours today, however it was. Total up that time for the entire week. So in your notebook, you'll have, okay, I watched 3 hours this day, 2 hours this day, half hour this day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Add it all up and then figure out what your total is for an entire week from Sunday to Sunday, or Monday to Monday, or Tuesday to Tuesday. The national average is 36.2 hours a week. That's a lot. Now that you've actually charted that TV time, what I'd like you to do is just, well, what is it? Is it 36.2? Is it 20? Is it 10? Is it 50? Whatever it is, just write it down. And then think about your short-term goals for this class and other classes. So, for this class, you are already probably thinking about test exams. You're probably thinking about, getting the best grades in school. You're thinking about college exams. Those are kind of short-term and long-term goals. Also, don't be afraid to think about that dream career. I don't know what that is for you, but you do. And you have to think about, well, what that is and what kind of effort it's going to take. And ask yourself this. Can you meet your short-term goals and your dream career with that weekly average of TV time? I don't care what it is. Just think about that. And after you think about that, consider your habits for this coming week. So, that's it for this quick lesson of Educator.com. Go ahead and chart your TV time, and I'll see you next time.